The year was 1942. The air over the high desert of the Navajo Nation was so clear it hurt the eyes, carrying the stark scent of sun-baked juniper and the ancient dust of the Diné land. For Chi Big Horse, the rhythm of life was measured not by clocks, but by the slow, deliberate turning of the wool spindle in his hands. He sat beside his Anike, grandmother, weaving a rug patterned with symbols older than the American Constitution, trying to ignore the metallic, crackling voice of the radio, a fragile connection to the distant white man's war. Chi was a man built between two worlds. He knew the complex kinship structures of his people, the sacred mountain ranges, and the songs for every season. He also knew the sterile, rigid lessons from the Pharaoh boarding school, where they had forcibly shorn his hair, stripped his name to Chester Bighorn, and punished him severely for speaking the flowing, complicated clicks and tones of Diné Bizad. They had called his mother tongue savage, primitive, and obstacle to progress. He had learned the language of the Bilagana, white people, but had never truly let go of his own. A sound alien to the quiet desert silence interrupted the rhythmic thunk of the weaving comb, the groan of an aging Ford pickup. It spat dust like a dragon on the horizon. Out stepped Hostine Nez, a respected elder and tribal liaison, dressed in denim and a wide-brimmed hat. He did not look like the recruiting sergeants Chi had seen in the newspaper clippings. He carried no flags, only a solemn expression and a heavy sealed manila envelope. Chester Bighorn, Nez began, using the dreaded English name, his voice low and formal. Then he switched, the sound of Diné Bizad washing over them, rich and complex, a language of deep canyons and endless sky. The wind of the war has come for our voice, my son. The enemy, the Nakai, they speak in shadows, and the American leaders are blind. They are desperate. They need what they tried to destroy. They need the word you were forbidden to speak. Chi's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drum against the desert silence. He looked at the sealed envelope, then at the man. A secret mission, a call to arms that used his heritage, not demanded its sacrifice. The irony was a bitter, confusing taste. His grandmother, who understood the weight of Nez's visit, nodded once, her eyes dark with wisdom and worry. "Go, my grandson," she spoke, her words a quiet benediction. "Go and make our voice a shield for this land, for all people on this land. But remember your songs. They are the roots. Do not let the loud noises of the Bilagana make you forget who you are." 2 weeks later, Chester Bighorn, now Private Chi Bighorn, U.S. Marine Corps, found himself in the relentless heat of Camp Pendleton, California. The desert was gone, replaced by barracks smelling of stale sweat and bleach, and the ceaseless, deafening roar of planes practicing landings on the nearby airstrip. He was not alone. 41 young Navajo men, ranging from scared teenagers to stoic fathers, had been pulled from the scattered hogans and dusty ranches of the nation. They were a motley crew. Men who had never seen the ocean, men who spoke broken English, men who shared the same profound sense of cultural dislocation. They were the first cohort of the Code Talkers. Their commanding officer was a lean, intense man named Lieutenant Colonel Baker, a communications expert who looked permanently stressed. He gathered them in a sealed subterranean bunker, a cool, windowless room that felt like a tomb. "Gentlemen," Baker announced, tapping a pointer against a map of the Pacific that was riddled with Japanese-held islands. "You are here because of a simple fact. The Japanese have broken every code we have thrown at them. Every cipher, every Hashin, every complex mathematical algorithm. They are reading our mail faster than we can write it. You," he swept his hand toward the Navajo man, "will change that. Your language is our final desperate key." The task they faced was unprecedented: to create an unbreakable code using their forbidden language, a code that could translate the technical savagery of modern warfare, tanks, machine guns, grenades, into the poetry of the Dine world. Chi was paired with Claude Deswood. Claude was an older man, perhaps 25, with a sardonic intelligence that glittered in his dark eyes. Claude was a staunch traditionalist who had run away from the boarding school 3 times, earning the scar above his eye from a particularly brutal teacher. He carried a deep, burning resentment for the white world and saw this mission as a profound, ironic joke. "So, Hastine Big Horse," Claude drawled in Dine Bizad, wrapping his name in a formality that underscored his distance. "The men who told us our words were worthless now want us to save their lives with them. What a wonderful comedy this is." "It is survival, Claude," Chi argued quietly, running his hand over the worn leather of his rifle strap. "If the Americans lose, we lose everything, our nation included. We are making our voice a shield, remember?" "We are making their shield," Claude countered. "Do not confuse their war with our destiny." Despite their ideological friction, their partnership was fiercely effective. The code they crafted was brilliant in its simplicity and impenetrable complexity. They started with the core, common Navajo words assigned to military terms. Turtle, alo K, became tank. Hummingbird, daye tich genie, became fighter plane. Iron fish, besh lo, became submarine. The alphabet was the masterpiece. To transmit a word not in their dictionary, like Navy, they assigned a Navajo word to each letter. The letter N could be represented by Nishja, owl, A by Wolachi, ant, V by Tlizzy, goat, Y by Tsaazia, yucca. But to foil any cryptographers, they used 3 different Navajo words for the same English letter, creating a multi-layered linguistic fortress. The training was exhausting, a non-stop drill in memorization, speed, and precision. They sat hunched over clunky field radios, transmitting fake battle orders while explosions from the training range rocked their bunker. They had to be faster than any radio operator and more accurate than any machine. Their final test was staged under a brutal summer sun on a distant bluff. They were tasked with relaying a complex series of artillery coordinates and troop movements in real time under simulated combat fire. The Ivy League cryptographers, the best code breakers the U.S. had, watched the clock. The standard U.S. Navy code took 4 minutes to transmit the message. The code talkers completed the entire transmission, flawless and complete, in 45 seconds. "My God," Colonel Baker whispered, staring at the results. "It's faster than speech." The unbroken word was ready. But the secret, the most vital shield America possessed, had to be protected at all costs. They were warned. Do not ever write this code down. Do not ever speak of it to anyone. Not your comrades, not your families, not until the war is won. While Chi Byhorse was trading the red dust of Arizona for the white sand of California, an entirely different, colder war was being waged in the stone-clad labyrinth of Washington, D.C. Dr. Eleanor Vance was an archivist. Her world was the smell of aging parchment, the silence of the stacks, and the historical truth found in forgotten documents. But the war had dragged her, a brilliant mind with a family history of passionate, principled activism, out of the Library of Congress and into the high-stakes, paranoid atmosphere of the Office of Strategic Services, the precursor to the CIA. Eleanor was tall, sharp, and possessed an uncanny ability to find the tiny, impossible stitch that unraveled the whole tapestry. She now worked in a dimly lit, highly restricted annex, tasked with cataloging and analyzing intercepted enemy communications and domestic propaganda. The work was grinding, often demoralizing, yet Eleanor found purpose in defending the very ideals of liberty her Quaker ancestors had fought for. One evening, while reviewing a stack of seemingly innocuous documents, a batch of mundane shipping manifests filed by a legitimate West Coast freight company, she noticed an anomaly. A sequence of numbers and letters randomly interspersed with inventory codes repeated across multiple documents. It was too regular to be an error, too random to be part of the actual data. "It's a cipher, Dr. Vance," noted Agent Sterling, a dismissive career intelligence officer who believed Eleanor's academic mind was too soft for espionage. "Probably just a numbers runner or some minor black market outfit." But Eleanor's instincts screamed otherwise. The sequence was sophisticated, using a substitution pattern that shifted based on the total number of items listed in the manifest. It was a domestic cipher, written by an American for American eyes, and it was complex enough to warrant attention. She worked on it for 3 days, fueled by lukewarm coffee and the quiet hum of the building's ventilation. On the 4th night, the pattern yielded. The coded messages weren't about black market tires or rationed sugar. They were about vital resources and disrupting transport routes. The first message she fully decoded chilled her blood. Rattlesnake moves west in 10 days. Target, Phoenix. Ensure interruption of resource train 733. Rattlesnake, a code name. Phoenix, a city in Arizona. Train 733, a transport route. Eleanor initially suspected arms or oil being smuggled overseas. She cross-referenced the transport schedules. Train 733 wasn't carrying oil or weapons. It was a troop train moving from a western base to a secret staging area for deployment in the Pacific. She pulled the manifest for Train 733. The manifest was heavily censored, but one detail stood out among the hundreds of standard-issue Marines. A specialized communications platoon, designated Special Unit 382. The origin point of the soldiers was a small, dusty town near the Navajo Nation. Eleanor stared at the manifest, her pulse accelerating. The spies were not targeting material. They were targeting people. A specialized unit of communicators. Could they possibly know about the new top-secret code? She felt a wave of cold dread. If the enemy knew about the code talkers, the most effective tool America had was already compromised. The war, which they were just beginning to turn, could be instantly lost. Eleanor slammed the decoding notes onto Sterling's desk. "This isn't a black market," she hissed, her voice low but fierce. "This is treason. High-level, organized treason. They are targeting a specialized communications unit. We need to alert Pacific Command immediately." Sterling, cool and condescending, barely glanced up. "Dr. Vance, the idea that some domestic spy ring knows about the new, highly classified language code is preposterous. It's likely they're just sabotaging a troop train for simple demoralization." But Eleanor knew the smell of deep-seated conspiracy. She knew the historical pattern of internal rot, of powerful men who felt their version of America was threatened by diversity and change. She knew that waiting for official channels could mean the difference between victory and catastrophe. The wind of war was howling, and it was about to collide in the vast open Pacific. Chi Bighorse, armed with the sacred words of his ancestors, was steaming toward a deadly ambush set not by the Japanese, but by a web of sophisticated, treacherous Americans. Eleanor Vance, the archivist, realized she could not wait for the bureaucracy. She had to become a warrior, fighting not with a gun, but with the cold, hard truth of a decoded message. The unbroken word was at stake, and the race had just begun. As they passed the dead end, Eliza froze. She hadn't seen it, she had felt it. A faint, low hum vibrating through the soles of her shoes. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Seamus shook his head. "Just the mountain settling, miss. This place breathes." "No, it's too steady." She knelt, placing her ear directly against the cold, damp rock floor. "It's a mechanical vibration, low frequency. Someone is working deep below us, or nearby, drilling or perhaps running an electric pump. This was impossible. The company records showed nothing active on this level." "We need to move faster," Eliza urged. She pulled out a specialized tool, a small magnetized hammer, and began tapping the walls, listening for the change in tone that would indicate a pocket or a void. Then she saw it. Not an inscription, but an intentional flaw in the rock itself. Embedded in the wall, perfectly aligned and spaced, were 3 small, smooth stones, not native to the surrounding quartz and silver ore. They were dark, obsidian-like, and polished smooth. They looked like oversized marbles. "Seamus, look, a marker." He approached cautiously. "Aye, a bit of old prospecting sign. But why 3, and why so deep?" Eliza reached out, touching the first stone. It was strangely warm. As her finger traced the polished surface, the faint hum she had felt earlier suddenly surged, sharp and brief, like a static shock. She snatched her hand back, startled. "They're not just markers," she breathed, looking at the pattern. "They're a sensor array, and they respond to touch." Using her hammer, she gently pried the first stone loose. It left a circular depression in the rock. As soon as it was removed, the hum intensified, shifting in pitch. "We shouldn't be touching those, miss," Seamus warned, his voice tight. "It's a sequence, Seamus, like the mathematical pattern in the assay reports. It's a code." She quickly pulled out her notebook and sketched the pattern of the 3 stones. She realized the geometric arrangement matched the 3 major claims of the Butte Lode, the Anaconda, the St. Lawrence, and the Never Sweat, but inverted. The 3 stones define a gate, Seamus. This is the anomaly, not a point on a map, but a hidden entry. The 3rd stone was directly above a section of the tunnel floor that appeared darker, newer, and smoother than the surrounding rock. It was a perfect 3-foot square slab of slate. This entire section was put here to cover something, Eliza concluded. This is where we use the dynamite. With grim efficiency, Seamus bored a shallow hole at the edge of the slate slab. He carefully packed in half a stick of dynamite and set a short fuse. "Stand back, miss, and cover your lamps. We don't want the glare seen from the main shafts if this blows big." They retreated around a bend. Seamus counted down, his voice swallowed by the close air. "Fire in the hole!" The blast was sharp, concussive, and deafening in the confined space. A cloud of acrid smoke and dust immediately billowed down the tunnel. As the dust began to settle, Eliza rushed forward, Seamus close behind. The slate slab was cracked, lifted, and pushed aside. Beneath it was not a continuation of the tunnel, but a drop. A perfectly cylindrical shaft, lined not with the rough blasted rock of modern mining, but with a smooth, dark, incredibly hard material that looked like petrified wood or basalt. It descended into absolute silent blackness. The air rising from the shaft was strangely cool and carried a faint, clean scent, like ozone and dry earth, entirely unlike the sulfurous stink of the Copper City. "God preserve us," Seamus muttered, holding his lamp over the edge. "That didn't get blasted out by no miner, Miss Thorne. That was made." Eliza looked down into the impossible darkness. The hum was suddenly loud here, radiating from the smooth, ancient lining of the shaft. She had found it, the anomaly, the center point of the geometric cipher that had structured the entire butte lode. "Seamus," she said, her voice trembling slightly with cold excitement, "this is not part of the silver rush. This is not even part of the copper lode. This shaft goes deeper than any known mine in Butte, and it was here long before our time. We're going down." She tied the heavy hemp rope securely around a major support timber, testing the knot with all her weight. "But miss, how far?" Eliza looked at the depth marked on the ancient half-destroyed map she carried, the map that outlined the secret triangular claim. The center point was marked with a double cross, and next to it a number, 440. 440 feet, she replied. "We go to the bottom, and we find out who built this." Seamus swallowed hard, but there's a wild, curious gleam in his eyes, the thrill of discovery overcoming the fear of the unknown. "After you then, Miss Thorne. We'll show those copper kings that there's more to this earth than just the price of metal." Eliza clipped the carbide lamp to her belt, took a deep breath, and swung her legs over the lip of the impossibly smooth shaft, starting the long, silent descent into the cipher of the Copper City. The Well of Whispers. The descent was slow, dangerous, and utterly silent save for the rasp of the rope through Eliza's gloved hands. The cylindrical shaft, lined with the baffling, smooth, dark material, was perfectly uniform, a testament to engineering far beyond the capabilities of 19th century mining. Every foot deeper confirmed Eliza's theory. This structure wasn't a natural anomaly, but a purposeful construction. At approximately 200 feet, the hum intensified, resonating directly through the rope. Eliza glanced down. The faint light from her carbide lamp, which bounced off the smooth walls, revealed something unexpected. A spiral pattern of minute, copper-colored etchings woven into the dark lining. They were not carved, they seemed embedded in the material itself, glowing faintly with the light of the lamp. "Seamus, stop! Do you see this?" she called up. Seamus, already sweating from the effort of bracing the rope, lowered himself alongside her. "What in the devil? Looks like ancient script, miss, but it's shining." "It's a conduit," Eliza whispered, running her finger along the pattern. "This entire shaft is designed to transmit something. Energy or information. It's what caused the strange magnetic readings in the ore. This isn't just a mine, it's a giant subterranean machine." She checked her geological compass again. Now, 200 feet down, the needle didn't spin. It pointed relentlessly, violently, straight down. They continued the drop, the shaft remaining agonizingly uniform. At 400 feet, the air became noticeably warmer and entirely dry, as if all moisture was being actively repelled. Eliza's heart pounded, counting down the last 40 feet. Finally, her feet scraped ground. They stood in a chamber. But it was not a cavern, nor a natural fault, nor a blasted-out tunnel. It was a room. It was large, perhaps 50 feet across, and perfectly hemispherical, like the interior of a colossal upturned bowl. The walls were lined with the same dark polished material as the shaft, but here the copper-colored spirals were numerous and intricate, winding toward a single focal point in the center of the floor. The most shocking thing, however, was the light. It wasn't lamplight. A soft, perpetual glow emanated from the ceiling of the dome, diffused and warm, illuminating the chamber without a visible source. It was silent, sterile, and seemed to exist outside the rules of the world above. "It's not wood, Seamus, and it's not basalt," Eliza said, walking slowly toward the center. "It's a composite. This material is unlike anything I've ever seen. Look at the precision." In the exact center of the floor lay the focal point, a low hexagonal pedestal, also made of the dark material. Resting on the pedestal was a single object. It was roughly the size and shape of a human skull, but geometric and crystalline, made of the same electric blue azurite ore that Eliza had carried from the Ophir's upper levels. It wasn't raw rock. It had been cut, faceted, and polished into a complex, shimmering lattice. As they approached, the crystalline object pulsed, synchronizing with the low hum that saturated the chamber. Eliza reached out, her fingers trembling millimeters from the object. She felt a profound coldness radiating from it, despite the warmth of the room. "This is the core," she breathed. "The reason for the cipher, the pattern, and the geometry of the entire butte lode. They weren't mining for copper. They were mining around this, keeping it centered." Suddenly, the silent perfection of the chamber was violently shattered. Crack, crack, crack! The sound came from above, muffled but distinct. 3 rapid reports of what could only be a large-caliber rifle. Eliza and Seamus looked up, horrified, knowing the shots had been fired near the Ophir headframe, their escape route. "The blast," Seamus hissed, pulling a heavy-duty mining pick from his belt. "The Kings move faster than hell, miss." "My uncle," Eliza said, her mind racing. "He must have had men watching the old shafts. He knew the anomaly existed." The hum in the chamber suddenly increased, becoming a sharp, high-pitched whine. The crystalline object on the pedestal began to glow intensely, throwing brilliant blue light onto the dark walls, illuminating the copper spirals. Then the floor of the chamber shook violently. Not a gentle mining tremor, but a deliberate, mechanical grinding. "It's sealing!" Seamus yelled, pointing to the ceiling of the dome where the top of the smooth shaft was beginning to converge and fuse, rapidly cutting off their only way out. "It's reacting to the disturbance! We're trapped!" Eliza knew she had only seconds. She didn't hesitate. She plunged her hand toward the crystalline object, ignoring the piercing cold. As her fingers closed around the faceted artifact, the light in the room flared white-hot, and a jolt of pure, disorienting energy shot up her arm. She felt not pain, but a sudden, overwhelming rush of information, a flood of geometric equations, ancient images of the valley before Butte existed, and a terrifying vision of colossal energy surging through the copper veins of the surrounding mountain. The noise stopped. The light died down. The chamber returned to its silent, eerie glow. The shaft above was now completely sealed, leaving no trace of the entrance. Eliza stood, breathing hard, the cool, heavy crystal object clutched in her hand, the vision already fading into a confusing haze of numbers and shapes. "We have to move," Seamish urged, his eyes wide. "If they know we're down here, they'll bring the drill. We need another way out." Eliza looked back at the wall behind the pedestal. The copper spirals seemed to flow toward that one section. The crystalline object in her hand pulsed again, and as it did, a small, barely visible line appeared on the dark wall behind the pedestal, the outline of a second door. "This isn't just a core, Seamus. It's a key," Eliza said, holding the crystal up to the lock line. "The story isn't over. It's just beginning. My uncle wants this, and whatever it protects is in there." She pressed the crystal to the seam. A soft click echoed in the silent room, and the section of the wall slid inward, revealing a dark, narrow passage. They stepped through, leaving the immaculate, impossible chamber behind. The passage was unlined, rough, and smelled faintly of fresh air, a sign of an ancient, unknown ventilation system, or perhaps a way out to the vast, undeveloped canyons far from the anaconda's reach. Above them, Marcus Thorne, the Copper King, was already on the phone in his opulent mansion, his voice cold and furious. "I don't care about the noise, Daly. My niece, Eliza Thorne, has gone into the Ophir shaft. She has found the anomaly. Seal the mine. Blast the shaft. I want her and whatever she found brought back to me, dead or alive." Eliza and Seamus are now in a hidden tunnel system beneath Butte, pursued by the most powerful man in the state, armed only with a mysterious crystalline artifact. The Rat Hole and the Tycoon. The passage behind the secret wall was a welcome change from the machined perfection of the anomaly chamber. It was rough, uneven, and smelled of the clean, dry earth of an untouched subterranean world. Eliza and Seamus scrabbled through, their carbide lamp throwing frantic shadows. "It's a natural fissure, opened up," Seamus panted, navigating a tight bend. "Runs along the granite fault line. Must be thousands of years old. No one in Butte knows about this." "Someone did," Eliza corrected, clutching the crystalline artifact. The artifact was warm against her palm, and the rhythmic, silent hum had now resolved into a barely perceptible pulse. When she turned her head in the wrong direction, the pulse felt muted. When she faced the way she needed to go, it grew stronger, like a compass needle guiding her through the impossible darkness. The geometry of the lode was a blueprint. This shaft was the center point, and this tunnel is the escape hatch. It was all planned. They were deep beneath the city, but the ground shook with a new, terrifying force. Not an earthquake, but the heavy, deliberate thudding of drills. Marcus Thorne was wasting no time. "They've brought in the big steam-driven drills," Sheamus said, recognizing the vibration. "The ones they use for sinking new shafts. They're going to obliterate that entire section, miss. They think we're still down there." Eliza felt a sickening twist of guilt. Thorne wasn't just sealing the evidence. He was trying to bury his own niece. "We must find a way up to the surface network," she urged. "The drainage tunnels, the old ventilation shafts." After a terrifying half-hour of climbing over rubble and squeezing through narrow passages, the clean air vanished, replaced by the noxious, multi-layered stench of butte, sulfur, coal smoke, and raw sewage. They had found the rat holes, the labyrinthine, informal network of drains and abandoned prospecting cuts that ran like the city's poisoned capillaries. These tunnels were the hidden highways of the poor, the drunk, and the dispossessed. As they crawled through a low, brick-lined conduit, the sounds of the chase grew closer. Not drills, but human voices and the scrape of boots on rock, muffled but distinct. "They're in the main gallery," Sheamus hissed, pulling them both into a small alcove where an iron grate marked an old, unused ventilation shaft. "Anaconda guards. They're too clean-cut for honest miners, miss. They're the company's private army, Thorne's goons." A voice boomed nearby, the tone flat and authoritative. "He said to check every fissure, no matter how small. If they're here, the reward is $500. Keep the lamps low." Eliza flattened herself against the cold, damp brick, the crystalline object, the key, pressing into her chest. In the frantic darkness, she focused on its gentle pulsing, allowing it to clear the panic from her mind, focusing her attention on a different sound, the distant rhythmic clatter of a train, the Northern Pacific Line. "We need to get to the main culvert," she whispered to Sheamus. "It runs straight to the riverbed, past the smelters. We can intercept the early morning freight." The last few hundred yards were a desperate, silent scramble, played out in the dark between the sewer lines and the sound of their pursuers. They emerged, gasping, from a large iron-ringed drainage pipe near the bank of Silver Bow Creek, a river that had long ago ceased to be silver and was now a sickening, toxic copper green. The Anaconda smelters, hulking, monstrous buildings of brick and steel, dominated the horizon, their smokestacks painting the eastern sky with a poisonous haze. "There," Sheamus pointed. A long freight train headed east was slowly gathering steam, preparing to pull out of the Butte rail yard. They ran, using the noise of the train and the darkness of the industrial yards as cover. They clambered onto an open flat car laden with timber, collapsing in the shadow of the woodpile just as the train gave a long final whistle and began to move, pulling them away from the smoking, murderous city. Meanwhile, in the mahogany-paneled library of the Copper King mansion, Marcus Thorne stood over a map of the Butte lode, a thin, silver-headed cane tapping an impatient rhythm on the priceless Persian rug. He was a man of terrifying efficiency, his handsome face sharp with intellect and absolute power. "They're gone, sir. We've blasted the shaft and the surrounding tunnels. The structure is entirely collapsed. But the blast radius confirms one thing. The anomaly was precisely where your father's old notes suggested. A geometrically perfect cylindrical shaft. But the girl and the Irishman, they are not in the debris." Marcus's eyes, the same piercing blue as Eliza's, narrowed.
The tunnel she entered, the one I theorized about. The natural fissure that runs parallel to the Great Vein. That's how they escaped. They have the key. He walked to a heavy iron-bound safe concealed behind a bookshelf and spun the dial, revealing a single velvet-lined box. Inside lay a smaller, duller piece of the same azurite crystal. But this one was broken, clearly a fragment of a larger object. The key is not merely an ornament, gentlemen. It is a focus, Marcus explained, his voice low and rich. My father was an associate of Nikola Tesla. They sought a means of wireless power transmission that did not rely on towers, but on the Earth itself. They theorized that certain geological structures could be used to amplify and conduct power. The Butte Lode, a mountain of copper and silver, is the largest naturally occurring transformer on the planet. He tapped the map again, his finger resting on the triangular cipher.
The three major claims, Anaconda, St. Lawrence, Neversweat, were not just rich mines. They were the terminals of a vast natural circuit board designed to harvest and focus the Earth's static charge. The anomaly was the primary condenser, the battery, and the object Eliza now holds is the master tuning fork, the key. He turned to his chief enforcer. With that artifact, the potential power stored beneath Butte could be released in a flash or controlled to power the entire western United States wirelessly for free. This is the culmination of Tesla's unfinished work, the very thing that Thomas Edison and J.P. Morgan sought to crush. So she has the power to destroy us, sir? The enforcer asked, pale. Worse, Marcus corrected, a dangerous smile spreading across his face. She has the power to make my power obsolete, to render the entire business of copper wiring, my entire empire, worthless. This is not about wealth, though it secures it. This is about control of the age of electricity. The Copper King will not be dethroned by a niece and a crystal. He picked up a phone receiver, connecting directly to the Northern Pacific dispatcher. A private car is being prepared, he said. I want all telegraph operators along the line to know this. Eliza Thorne is a thief who has stolen valuable company property. Her destination will be the one place where Tesla's great experiment was supposed to be realized, the Pan American Exposition, Buffalo, New York. She is heading east. I will be in pursuit. Do not intercept her. Simply track her. I want her to lead me to the final piece of this puzzle. Eliza and Seamus are now fugitives on a freight train, heading into the heart of the Gilded Age industrial landscape, chased by the most powerful man in the copper industry. They are traveling toward the location of the greatest showcase of electricity and innovation, the Pan American Exposition, where the War of the Currents reached its fever pitch. The plains and the pulse. The Northern Pacific freight train rattled eastward, an iron behemoth dragging them away from the smoke and shadows of Butte. Eliza Thorne and Seamus O'Connell were hidden beneath a tarp on the flat car. The dry, sweeping air of the Montana plains, a stark contrast to the thick, sulfurous atmosphere of the Copper City. Eliza hadn't slept. She couldn't. The crystalline key, no longer cold, but radiating a dull, continuous warmth, was nestled in her satchel. Every pulse it emitted seemed to align with the rhythmic click of the train wheels on the tracks, as if it were using the steel lines of the nation as a massive, continuous conductor. "Are they still behind us, Seamus?" Eliza whispered, her voice rough from the dust and adrenaline. Seamus, who had managed a few hours of uneasy rest, shifted. "If Marcus Thorne is pursuing, he won't be on this freight. He'll be in his private parlor car, a dozen hours behind us, tracing the telegraph lines. But his eyes are everywhere, miss. Every station master, every train yard foreman. We're on borrowed time." Eliza pulled the key out. In the weak, pre-dawn light, the facets of the blue crystal shone, reflecting the faint stars. "I need to understand what this is," she said, tracing the intricate cuts. "It's not just a focus for copper, Seamus. When I held it, I felt images, ancient geometry, and a power so vast it felt like the earth itself was breathing." Seamus grimaced. "Miss, I'm a miner, not a scientist. But I know things that come out of the ground. That thing is unnatural. It has the feel of a sacred object, or a weapon." The train screeched around a bend, heading into the arid, expansive lands of Dakota Territory. It was a barren, empty canvas where the electric pulse of the crystal suddenly grew more intense. As they passed a seemingly abandoned field littered with alkali-whitened rock, the crystal in Eliza's hand began to vibrate violently. It hummed so loudly that Seamus could hear it clearly, a high, insistent pitch. "What is it doing?" Seamus grabbed his knife, looking around wildly. Eliza stared at the empty landscape, a sudden comprehension dawning in her eyes. "Look, Seamus, the rock, the alignment." She pointed to a ridgeline in the distance. The rocks there were not randomly scattered. They were placed, small, dark stones forming a massive, incredibly subtle semicircle. A feature so vast it was only visible when viewed from a high vantage point, or, in this case, when tuned in to the frequency of the key. "It's another marker," Eliza exclaimed. The Butte lode wasn't the only cipher. The entire western grid was laid out by these markers. I felt it, a vision of a network stretching from the Rockies across the plains. She held the key up. It flared, throwing a sharp beam of brilliant blue light upward for a split second. And then, the impossible happened. A few hundred yards away, sitting abandoned next to the tracks, was a simple telegraph pole, a standard piece of Western Union infrastructure. As the blue light from the key vanished, the wire connecting the poles suddenly began to glow, a faint, visible white heat. The copper wire, designed to carry a minuscule electrical signal, was now humming with vast, uncontrolled power. The pole sizzled, sparked, and then, with a sharp crack, the porcelain insulator shattered and the wooden pole burst into flames. The phenomenon lasted only a second, leaving the pole a smoking ruin, the telegraph wire snapping and whipping in the air. Seamus scrambled back against the timber. "Holy Mother of God! You just weaponized the telegraph line! You blew up the wire!" Eliza was pale, her hand shaking as she looked from the smoldering pole to the key. "I didn't mean to. I just held it up. The markers, they must be focusing the natural static charge of the planes, concentrating it along the copper lines. This key is not just a tuner, Seamus. It's an amplifier." The realization hit her with the force of an actual electric shock. This object was the reason for the copper boom. The initial silver prospectors of the 1860s hadn't just stumbled upon veins. They had been, consciously or unconsciously, following an ancient, vast blueprint, a hidden continental energy map. They followed the lines of magnetic anomaly, which led them to copper, the perfect metal for conducting the Earth's focused charge. The Gilded Age's industrial expansion, the miles of copper wire, the telegraph lines, the very foundations of the electrical age, was not just utilizing copper. It was, inadvertently, completing the ancient circuit. Marcus Thorne doesn't just want to control the power grid, Seamus, Eliza said, her voice heavy with the truth. He wants to control the Earth's power. He wants to monopolize the entire secret electrical network of the American continent. They were no longer running from a mogul. They were running with the master switch to a continental power source. The history in the helix. The freight train continued its steady pace, carrying them further into the heart of the country and closer to the inevitable confrontation. Eliza used the slow, monotonous journey to study the key, now feeling a grave, almost terrified responsibility for the object. She pulled out her notebook and began sketching the faint, copper-colored etchings she had seen lining the anomaly shaft in Butte. She recognized the shapes, complex, interconnected loops and spirals. They weren't letters nor familiar symbols. But then, as she sketched, she remembered a footnote in one of her grandfather's obscure journals, a drawing of artifacts recovered from an ancient burial mound in the Ohio Valley. The mound builders, she murmured, the Adena and Hopewell civilizations dating back 2,000 years. They were known for vast, complex earthworks and their sophisticated use of copper. She sketched the Adena spiral motif, famous in archaeological circles, next to the etching from the shaft. Look, Seamus, the similarity. The mound builders weren't just burying copper ornaments. They were building antennae. Their mounds and earthworks were precisely aligned to cosmic points and geological fault lines, a massive, ancient engineering project. Eliza's hypothesis crystallized. The mound builders, 2,000 years ago, discovered the principle of the Earth's natural electromagnetic field and established the energy grid across the continent, marking key focal points with geometric earthworks. Centuries later, the location of the greatest convergence point, the copper-rich Butte lode, was intentionally secured with the advanced subterranean structure, the anomaly, to house the key, perhaps to prevent misuse. Now, in the 1890s, the industrial expansion of the Gilded Age, specifically the need for copper to power the war of the currents between Edison, direct current, and Tesla Westinghouse, alternating current, had unknowingly reactivated the ancient system. The nation's copper infrastructure had reconnected the mound builders' grid. The mound builders weren't primitive tribes, Eliza concluded. They were masters of geophysics. And this key is their legacy. It allows control over the entire vast network. And that's why Tesla, Marcus Thorne's associate, was interested in Butte. He wasn't just observing the copper. He was attempting to reverse engineer an ancient technology for wireless power. Seamus looked at the drawing of the complex spiral, then at the smoking pole they had left behind on the Dakota Plains. A look of grim understanding crossed his face. "So the whole country's a massive power plant, miss," he said quietly, "and you have the main switch. If Marcus Thorne gets his hands on that, he doesn't just own the copper market, he owns the light. And if he owns the light, Seamus," Eliza added, looking east toward the rising sun and the direction of New York and the seat of global financial power, he owns the future. We have to get this to the only man who tried to give this power to the world, Nikola Tesla. And where is Mr. Tesla now? "He's in Buffalo, New York," Eliza confirmed, folding her notes with a renewed sense of purpose. "At the Pan American Exposition, showcasing his alternating current technology. The greatest display of light and power the world has ever seen. The perfect place for the final demonstration of the key, or the final confrontation. Eliza and Seamus are closing in on Buffalo, the site of the greatest technological event of the Gilded Age, while Marcus Thorne's pursuit and control over the nation's communications tightens around them. The telegraph trap. Eliza and Seamus spent 2 desperate days clinging to the underside of the Continental Rail network, moving from freight car to freight car, avoiding yards and major junctions. They passed through the relentless, growing heart of industrial America, Chicago, where the smoke was so thick it blotted out the midday sun, and Cleveland, where the massive steel mills glowed like infernal, hungry beasts. The constant vibration and the exposure to the elements were minor hardships compared to the one growing terror, the key. Eliza had kept the crystalline artifact wrapped in thick wool inside her satchel, but its power was too immense to be contained. The continuous low pulse which had guided them out of the Butte tunnels was now having a noticeable, crippling effect on her. "Miss Thorne, you look like a ghost," Seamus observed during a brief stop in a dark rail siding outside of Pittsburgh. Eliza's hands trembled constantly, and the skin around her eyes was drawn and pale, ringed with deep fatigue. "I'm not sleeping, Seamus. When I close my eyes, I see the spirals. I feel the entire continent, the electric charge, the ground currents. The key is feeding me the data of the grid, Seamus, but it's doing more than that. It's drawing energy from me." She showed him her left palm. Where the crystal had rested, there was a faint red burn mark, like a small symmetrical lightning bolt. The key was using her as a temporary conductor, a human switch. It needs a stable, focused source to use its power, like the anomaly chamber or, I suspect, the Grand Exposition grounds, Eliza explained, forcing herself to maintain her scientific focus. Until then, it's taking the minimal current it needs from the nearest available source, which is me. Seamus looked grim. "We need to get you off the train, miss. Get you food, proper sleep. Buffalo is still a full day's travel." "We can't," Eliza insisted, pulling a crude, hastily drawn map from her pocket, a map based on the geometric patterns she now instinctively felt. "We are approaching the next major marker point, near Erie. If Marcus Thorne's men are tracking us, this is where they'll make their move. The grid is strongest there. Their communications will be clearest." She was right. Marcus Thorne, leveraging his vast wealth and control over the nation's copper supply, had mobilized his forces. He wasn't relying on clumsy rail detectives. He was using the very electrical network she was running from. Thorne had ordered the Western Union telegraph lines near Erie, Pennsylvania, to be placed under constant surveillance. The theory was simple. If the key was an amplifier, its use, accidental or intentional, would create an electrical spike detectable by sensitive instruments along the copper grid. As their freight train rumbled past the shores of Lake Erie, the key in Eliza's satchel began to heat up rapidly, pulsing with a sharp, painful intensity. "They're searching for me," Eliza gasped, clutching her side. "They're using a detector, a high-frequency signal sent through the telegraph line, bouncing off the nearest strong conductor, which is the key." The next moment, a large black touring car, impossibly fast for the rough country road, sped alongside the train. Inside were two men in dark coats and matching bowler hats, anaconda guards, not rough company men, but professional agents. One of the men, lean and cold-eyed, stood up through the open roof of the car, leveling a rifle at their flat car. "Thorne's orders! Stop the train! Surrender the package, Miss Thorne!" the agent yelled over the roar of the engine. "They won't stop the train, Seamus. They just want the key." The agent fired. The bullet splintered the wood of the flat car, inches from Seamus's head. Eliza grabbed the key from her satchel. It was almost burning hot, vibrating uncontrollably. She knew she had to disable their communication, to blind them, but she couldn't risk accidentally destroying the entire local power grid, or worse, hurting innocent people. She focused on the vibration, remembering the geometric images from the anomaly. She found the frequency of the anaconda agent's communication, a subtle, parasitic spike on the massive continental hum. With a desperate surge of will, fighting through the dizziness and the pain in her palm, she deliberately channeled the key's power. She held the crystal high, aiming it not at the car, but at the main telegraph pole flashing by just ahead. Instead of causing an explosion, she sent a targeted counter-frequency, a single, massive, neutralizing pulse of energy. The telegraph pole didn't burst into flames. Instead, the wire between the last pole and the next fused instantly, turning white-hot and then snapping, showering sparks onto the ground. Simultaneously, the large touring car below died. The battery, the engine, the headlamps, all electronics and ignition systems were instantly disabled by the massive EMP-like pulse. The car veered off the road and crashed into a ditch, the agents reeling but alive, their instruments destroyed, their pursuit dead in the water. Eliza slumped back, gasping, sweat streaming down her face. The key immediately cooled, its pulse returning to a dull, rhythmic throb. The sheer, deliberate effort had drained her. "You didn't just stop their car, miss," Seamus said, his voice full of awe and fear. "You stopped the very age of electricity for 1,000 feet in every direction. You cut off all communication." "Temporarily," Eliza whispered, clutching the key to her breast. "But it bought us time, and it proved my hypothesis. The key controls the grid. But I can't keep doing this, Seamus. If I use it again, it might kill me. We have to reach Tesla. He must know how to decouple it from its user." The City of Light. They arrived in Buffalo, New York, under the cover of a thick, persistent lake fog. The contrast with the dark industrial landscape they had traversed was immediate and blinding. Buffalo was the gateway to the Pan American Exposition of 1901, a spectacular, ephemeral city of plaster and promise, dedicated entirely to the themes of progress, prosperity, and the incredible world-changing power of alternating current, AC, electricity. The exposition grounds were a dazzling, overwhelming spectacle. At night, the buildings glowed with over 200,000 electric lamps, transforming the landscape into a shimmering, mythological wonderland, the City of Light. This was Nikola Tesla's triumph, powered by the massive hydroelectric dam at Niagara Falls. Eliza, disguised in a heavy traveling cloak, felt an almost religious awe. This was the culmination of the world's desire for the power that she now held, literally in her hand. "The source of all this light," Eliza said, gesturing toward the dazzling electric tower that stood at the center of the grounds, "the hydroelectric power at Niagara Falls is fed by the very same continental currents the key manages.
This exposition is not just a showcase, it's the single most concentrated point of electrical energy on the continent right now. If Thorne manages to insert the key here, he won't just control the grid, he'll have the power to broadcast it or destroy it. Their first objective, find Nikola Tesla. They quickly realized this was nearly impossible. Tesla was an eccentric, reclusive genius, protected by guards and surrounded by admirers and powerful, jealous rivals. Chief among them, the men who financially backed Thomas Edison and who stood to lose everything if Tesla's AC power and, potentially, wireless transmission succeeded. Eliza knew she couldn't rely on luck. She had to use the key to gain entrance. The electric tower, she concluded, it's the heart of the exposition's power system. If I can get close enough, the key will communicate with the power source. Tesla will feel the presence of the key, and he will know exactly what it is. Seamus secured them temporary work passes, Eliza as a botanist cataloging the exotic plants in the horticultural building, and Seamus as a maintenance worker. As they walked toward the dazzling 398-foot electric tower, Eliza felt the key's pulse grow into a fierce, eager beat. The strain on her was immense, but she ignored it, focusing on the tower's massive copper lightning rod that topped the structure, which she knew served as an elaborate concealed antenna. Just as they reached the grand fountain of abundance, the final terrifying realization hit her. She saw a man standing near the tower, impeccably dressed, talking into an elaborate newfangled telephone, a technology still rare outside of major commercial offices. It was Marcus Thorne, her uncle, who had obviously taken a much faster private route. He was not just tracking her, he was waiting. But it wasn't just him. Standing beside him was a thin, distinguished, familiar figure with a wild shock of black hair, his eyes scanning the crowd with an intense, distant focus. "Seamus," Eliza whispered, her heart dropping into her stomach. "That man, the one talking to my uncle, that is Nikola Tesla." Marcus Thorne was not just pursuing the key. He had already brokered a deal. He had the genius inventor on his side. The key in Eliza's hand pulsed one final desperate time, and a terrible clear thought entered her mind, an image of the earth being choked by copper wire. The secret history was not simply discovered by Tesla. It was given to him. The true mystery was not where the key came from, but who was the original inventor of the anomaly, and why they had sought to bury the knowledge, and why Tesla, the great emancipator of electricity, was now working with the man who sought to monopolize it. Eliza is now standing in the heart of the most electrified place on Earth, holding the key to the entire continental power grid, facing both her ruthless uncle and the very genius she had hoped would save her. The devil's bargain. Eliza and Seamus quickly retreated behind a large pavilion dedicated to agricultural machinery. The dazzling light of the exposition, which just moments ago had seemed a beacon of hope, now felt like a spotlight on their immediate danger. "Tesla is working with him," Eliza whispered, the words catching in her throat. "The man who promised to give the world free power is consorting with the Copper King who wants to monopolize it. Why?" "Maybe the king offered him a bigger crown, miss," Seamus speculated grimly. "But we have to assume that if they know about the key, they know we're here. We need a distraction." Eliza looked at the electric tower, the nerve center of the entire exposition, only 100 yards away. The key in her satchel pulsed rapidly, drawn to the enormous, concentrated power flowing from Niagara Falls, which Tesla systems were harnessing. No distraction, Eliza decided, pulling the crystalline key from her satchel. Its surface was now glowing faintly, and the red burn on her palm was throbbing painfully. "We go straight to the tower. The key is drawn to power. It wants to complete the circuit." I have to believe there is a core truth to Tesla's vision, that he intended to emancipate the power, not hoard it. He may be allied with Thorn, but he is a man of science, driven by curiosity. If I put the key into his hands, I force his choice, the Copper King's greed or the ancient truth. They moved, blending into the surging crowd of exposition visitors, men in straw hats and women in summer dresses, all mesmerized by the sheer technological spectacle. They slipped past a checkpoint, using Seamus's maintenance pass, and entered the base of the electric tower, a massive hall filled with humming, shielded alternators and thick bundles of copper cable running from the Niagara transmission lines. The air crackled with palpable energy. As they ascended a winding service staircase, they heard voices arguing in a private office near the tower's apex. Eliza peered through a crack in the doorframe. Inside stood Marcus Thorn, Nikola Tesla, and two of Thorn's hard-faced anaconda guards. A large, complex metallic device, a prototype of a power transmission apparatus, covered in coils and copper wiring, stood on a table between the two powerful men. "The time for theory is over, Nikola," Thorn was saying, his voice cutting and impatient. "The girl has the key. Without it, your wireless power system is a useless collection of copper coils. With it, we can achieve true continental broadcasting, bypassing every wire company, every utility, and making us the sole supplier of power to the entire continent. You get the science, I get the business. Now, where is the optimal insertion point?"
Tesla, dressed in his impeccable suit, looked strained, his usually distant eyes clouded with frustration. The anomalous energy node must be inserted into the main harmonic circuit of the tower's central oscillator. The key is designed to stabilize the continental earth current, allowing for efficient wireless transmission. But if the girl has been handling it, the key's temporal synchronization may be unstable. We need to secure it before it is activated randomly. "Unstable is fine," Thorn sneered. "I want the power. The key is merely a tool for domination." Thorn's words confirmed Eliza's worst fears. Thorn's goal was not just wealth, it was total control. Before Eliza could move, the door to the office burst open. One of the anaconda guards had spotted Seamus. "There, the Irishman!" The chase was on. Eliza shoved the heavy crystal key into Seamus's hands. "Go, take it to the top. I'll hold them off." She grabbed a heavy copper wrench from a nearby workbench and slammed it into a control panel, showering the room in sparks and temporarily knocking out the lights. In the ensuing chaos, Seamus sprinted up the final flight of stairs, the pulsing key lighting his way. Eliza faced Thorn and Tesla, surrounded by the guards. "A wrench, Eliza, the tools of your proletariat friends." Thorn stepped around a fallen guard, his silver-headed cane now revealed to conceal a razor-sharp stiletto blade. "You should have stayed in the libraries, girl. Now give me the key." "This key doesn't belong to you, Uncle," Eliza defied him, ignoring the danger. "It doesn't belong to anyone. It's a gift of ancient knowledge, and you intend to turn it into a weapon of monopoly." "Ancient knowledge?" Thorn laughed, a cruel, dry sound. "It's geology, Eliza, and science. Do you think you're the first to decipher the mound builder's ritual sites? Tesla and I found the original engineer's notes, the man who built the anomaly." He pointed the stiletto toward Tesla. "He wasn't some primitive chief. He was a European engineer and philosopher who came to this continent almost 2,000 years ago. He realized the Continental's potential, constructed the anomaly, and then buried the key, horrified by the magnitude of the destructive power he had unlocked. He wasn't a hero, Eliza. He was a terrified failure. "My grandfather worked for your family, Uncle," Eliza demanded, ignoring his terrifying revelation. "He knew about this, didn't he? Was his accident just you tying up a loose end?" Thorne's eyes flickered, the momentary hesitation confirming her deepest fear. "Your grandfather was weak, a sentimental fool who believed in shared knowledge. When he realized the key's true potential in 1899, not for power, but for total network control, he tried to destroy it. I stopped him, just as I will stop you." The resonance of the Copper City. Meanwhile, Seamus had reached the roof of the electric tower. The powerful roar of the Niagara-fed alternators was deafening. He was standing directly beneath the massive, elaborate copper lightning rod that served as the tower's central antenna. He looked down to see Tesla and Thorne bursting through the trapdoor, followed by Eliza, who had seized a heavy copper coil from a table and was using it as a shield. "Insert it now, Seamus! Don't let him have it!" Eliza screamed over the electrical roar. Seamus didn't hesitate. He thrust the crystalline T into the hollowed, gilded apex of the lightning rod. The effect was instantaneous and spectacular. The key locked into place with a profound thumb. The electrical roar amplified tenfold. The entire electric tower instantly became bathed in a blinding, pure white light. The air around the lightning rod began to vibrate, and the vast copper structure of the tower acted like a colossal tuning fork, focusing the energy flowing from Niagara Falls. Marcus Thorne staggered back, shielding his eyes. "It's working, Nicola! Initiate the broadcast sequence!" Tesla, however, was staring at Eliza, who had just scrambled onto the rooftop. The immense raw power focused by the key seemed to have rejuvenated her, banishing the pallor and the exhaustion. She was acting not as a victim, but as a conductor. "It works, Marcus," Tesla muttered, his voice barely audible. "But the resonance, it's too great." Eliza stepped toward the lightning rod, ignoring the crackling static. "It's not just broadcasting power, Uncle. It's broadcasting truth. The energy pulse is running through the entire grid, through every copper wire and mound builder marker across the continent. It's not a monopoly, it's a global broadcast. As she spoke, the white light coalesced into a sharp, blinding blue beam that shot from the top of the tower into the sky. But the light wasn't just a beam. It was carrying images. A flicker of ancient earthworks, of complex geometric designs, of the pristine valley that became Butte, and finally, a clear image of Marcus Thorne's office and his secret journal detailing the murder of her grandfather. The image was broadcast simultaneously across every lamp and electrical sign in the exposition. A shocking, silent confession visible to tens of thousands. Thorne roared in fury, lunging at Eliza with the concealed stiletto. "You've destroyed everything!" Eliza didn't fight. She placed her hands on the vibrating copper base of the lightning rod, deliberately allowing the key's power to surge through her. "The grid isn't yours to control, Uncle. It's a natural force." She channeled a final destructive pulse. The energy, now focused by the key and amplified by the copper antenna, was directed not outward, but inward, to the electric tower itself. The tower did not explode. It simply ceased to conduct. The colossal copper spire, overloaded by the raw, untamed earth current, became a single, useless piece of metal. Every light on the tower, every lamp on the exposition grounds, and every electrical sign in Buffalo died simultaneously. The city of light was plunged into absolute, echoing darkness. The sudden silence was more shocking than the sound of any explosion. When the brief, brilliant darkness lifted, illuminated only by the distant moon and the astonished murmurs of the crowd, Marcus Thorne lay stunned, his stiletto clattering uselessly on the roof. The key, detached from the rod by the immense surge, lay near Eliza's feet, its light extinguished. Eliza was exhausted but alive. The burn on her hand faded. She had successfully disabled the key's connection to the grid, effectively turning the continent's greatest electrical showcase into the largest blackout in American history, simultaneously broadcasting her uncle's conspiracy to the entire world via the last dying surge of power. Nikola Tesla stood mesmerized, his eyes fixed on the inert key. He was defeated, not by a competitor, but by the overwhelming, unexpected truth of the ancient technology he had sought to command. "The resonance," Tesla whispered, bending down to collect the key with a new, reverent respect. The engineer was right. The power cannot be enslaved. It can only be understood. Epilogue: The Unwritten Future. The ensuing scandal was immediate and world-shattering. The great blackout of the Pan American Exposition, followed by the silent broadcast image of the Copper King's conspiracy, brought down Marcus Thorne's empire overnight. He was arrested on charges related to corporate espionage and the murder of Eliza's grandfather. The Copper Wars were over, ended not by legislation, but by an ancient artifact and a massive overload. Eliza Thorne, the geologist who went underground for truth, became a reluctant national figure. She worked with a chastened Nikola Tesla, who, motivated by the devastating demonstration of the key's potential, dedicated the remainder of his life not to commercially broadcasting power, but to the pure scientific study of the Earth's natural currents. The crystalline key was never publicly displayed. Eliza ensured it was sealed, not in a bank vault, but in a neutral, remote geological repository beneath the Earth, decoupling it completely from the man-made copper grid. The threat of continental monopoly was removed, and the potential for a world powered by clean, wireless energy was preserved, relegated to a future generation capable of using it responsibly. Eliza Thorne returned to academia, not as a professor of geology, but as a pioneer in geophysics, documenting the vast, intricate energy map left by the mound builders. She ensured that the true, surprising history of the American continent, that its industrial age was inadvertently built upon an ancient, sophisticated electrical network, was acknowledged. The richest hill on Earth, Butte, Montana, was eventually mined out, but the subterranean anomaly, the perfect cylinder deep beneath the copper shafts, remained, a silent testament to the genius that came long before the Gilded Age, and a veiled promise for the future. Eliza kept only one artifact, the geological map of the triangular cipher, framed on her desk, a constant reminder that the most surprising truths are often those written in the unshakable geometry of the Earth itself. The Star of the West was attacked days later, but the hijackers found only worthless lead. They were quickly apprehended by Elias's armed tug and the waiting authorities. The failure of the Golden Fleece conspiracy proved to be a decisive economic victory for the Union. The uninterrupted flow of California gold, millions of dollars every month, provided nearly 1/3 of the hard currency needed by the Union Treasury. This constant infusion of gold stabilized the Union's financial markets and allowed them to continue prosecuting the war, a contribution that historians would later cite as essential to the North's victory. California, born from a spectacular, astonishing rush for personal wealth, had ultimately become the golden anchor of the Union cause. The legacy of the gold. When the war ended in 1865, California was a state transformed. The gold had been replaced by stability, the chaos by corporation, and the individual dream by a collective financial power. Cyrus, the former slave, now a free farmer, dedicated his fortune to creating an agricultural haven, choosing life over gold. Eleanor Vance used her wartime reputation to found the University of California's first medical school, ensuring the state's legacy included compassion and intellectual pursuit. Anya dedicated her life to legal activism, becoming a powerful, though unofficial, voice for the rights of all marginalized communities in the state she had helped secure. And Elias Thorne, the meticulous banker, emerged as the most powerful financial figure in the American West. He had risked everything, his life, his fortune, and his moral code, to save the Union, realizing that the astonishing truth of the gold rush was that the metal itself was merely a tool. The true, enduring alchemy was the forging of an American state, with all its compromises, complexities, and ultimately its powerful promise of freedom, built atop a massive, glittering foundation of dust.